Welcome, everyone. It's another review of a television show or some media. Well, what we're going to cover today is the Long Island Medium. I recently just reviewed the Hollywood Medium, which has just started. It's the first season. The Long Island Medium has been on for 8 seasons. So, as usual with these shows, I'm not really sure why they last as long as they do. I don't know what the interest is hearing other people's stories. And it's getting a psychic reading for somebody else and listening to them. Couldn't be more boring ultimately. Yet these shows seem to go on and on and on. But as usual, Hollywood really can't come up with any new ideas. How the ratings are in these shows just confounds me. It's the same old thing over and over again with the plethora of these kind of shows, the plethora of ghost hunting shows, and they're all the same, they're all boring, they all have all the same characters in it, and the people involved with it at the lowest level. But of course, Hollywood doesn't know where to go to seek proper talent and really isn't interested. They're looking to find manipulative people they can manipulate and control and do what they want with, because that's what Hollywood is all about. So there is no reality shows. They're all scripted to almost 100%, if not 100%. So that's something that everybody has to keep in mind, that everything is staged, everything is done. Now, these medium shows, and I've discussed that, and it's pretty much a rubber stamp of what I said about the Hollywood medium. The difference here is, of course, the personalities involved. Thankfully, this is a non-homosexual. It's a woman, I'm assuming, in her 40s, who has a family, etc. So at least it shows that, these are regular society people instead of freaks and weirdos like is portrayed of occultists all the time, which is really sad because it pushes other people away from getting involved in the occult if they see it's a goofy type person, strange person, and particularly homosexual person. So here we get, and of course you got to remember these shows are based on the fact of, ooh, wow, she's right again. You can't have a show where, well, lady, that's not true at all. It's nothing. I don't, it was my father that died, not my mother. And, we go on and on with these things. People go, wow, you're not going to tune into that every week. So the show is really based on how accurate is she? How amazing did she see that? Yeah, her mother's name was Bubbles and she got it. So we don't know if this is true or not, how much is staged and how much is an actual reading. How correct she is. They could read in situations just as these illusionist liar tricksters that go on the street will fail 20 times, or the reaction of the people will be, yeah, so what, I gotta go get a coffee. So what they're going to do is they're going to do that to 50 people, and when someone goes, wow, I've never seen anything like it, well, of course, that's the one that they're going to show. And of course, you're never going to show any failures, because that's what the TV is about. And as I keep trying to tell everybody, which you have to ingrain in your head, life is all about, I have to survive. This is my bread and butter. And to a large extent, I'm afraid that this is true. So these people that are involved in this are making money, and they're making lots of money. And the problem is when you go past that primal instinctual survival attitude, which pretty much you'll do anything to survive, when it goes into the sad, greedy area where people are doing things not to survive or to get by at a reasonable level, but to buy disgusting luxuries. Because it ain't good enough to have average things now. You gotta have shoes with red bottoms on them that are $3,000. So we don't know. We have to assume, and of course, to some extent, it isn't the mediums or anyone else's fault to some degree. Even though you have to get to a point where you say, "Hey, look, we're here for this amazing ability I have, and we have to portray it in a correct, right fashion to a degree. Now, putting a little Hollywood in things, jazzing it up, bringing in a freak, is certainly acceptable because you have to make things entertaining. And nobody wants to sit there and see a medium that's 100% correct. Yeah, well, we're going to talk about this today. Your mother had a pimple on her ass. You remember that? You had to take it to the doctor. So, you have that situation. So this is the East Coast, which is the typical East Coast Long Island woman attitude. If you're from back east, you probably enjoy this. Just as if the Hollywood guy had the Hollywood attitude, even though he wasn't from Hollywood, I don't believe. But, you have these two very typical, stereotypical people. So again, we don't know. As I said, the positive aspect of all this is that it shows a person with a normal family unit. The question comes yet again with all these shows, it's the same thing. Now, if I could sit down and work with these people and get some answers from them, etc., well, things could be gained, but of course, that's not what it's all about. And I don't know if they'd be even interested in that because, they're celebrities now, and of course they want to make money, so I don't know how serious they would be with someone trying to get to the facts of things, but comes down to the same old thing, is that if there are people that apparently can identify anybody they talk to's past relatives. Now you got to remember, this is a medium show. It's not a psychic show, or at least that's how it's portrayed. We don't know if mediumship isn't just a psychic reading, because there's not very much interaction of what's happening now. It's all about, your mother did this and that, blah, blah, blah. And they're happy to see you're doing okay. But there's very little knowledge comes from the fact of, is there an interaction here more than a reading? The fact that they can tell you about your mother, and your mother, went to secretarial school, or your daddy was an airplane pilot, or all these things you could gain from a standard psychic reading. You wouldn't have to get that information from a past relative to give that information. And it would be interesting if that relative had information that they knew about, and if they were asked about information we know they didn't know about. Meaning, if they didn't know a person, could they give information about that person from the other side? Meaning, if Aunt Claire didn't know one of your uncles, could she comment on that? So the whole idea is that it would be interesting to do that, to see if there is a limit to this knowledge, and is there a sense to this knowledge? And what kind of psychic readings are happening here? If they're psychic readings, are they actually talking to this entity that has passed, this spirit that has passed? And that's very, very interesting. And if these shows, like the ghost shows here again, if we have so many of human energy fields that are still active after death, I mean, this is the most important discovery of ever. I mean, really. We're talking about proof of life after death, which is what has all great societies and all humans strive for. The minute you figure out how to eat and you've done your proverbial humping, all societies have spent gobs of time on burial rites and basically living and providing for themselves to live somewhere else, because they don't want to in any way think that it permanently ends. Of course, the Egyptians are the most famous for this, but they're far from the only ones. Everyone's done it, back to the Neanderthals, who had complicated burial ritual, which shows a complicated connection to your own species of caring about those who have died, and the big question of wanting to live longer. So, I mean, these are things that are very critical, and a lot of decisions are made in life, good and bad, based on these long life aspects. People knew they lived longer. and did live longer, I would hope that people would treat each other better, and if they knew there was an afterlife, that things would be much more spiritually based instead of such a disgustingly low morality of owning things and abusing people that we have now. So, and of course, science doesn't want to touch any of this, mostly because they want to keep controlling you. And of course, when people have tried to do different things in these areas, they're ridiculed because of these areas. So, it's a real sad situation that science wants to make you into some sort of bionic being instead of developing and studying the mind. But of course, as I've said in other audios, this is all about control. If you're an individual, or all the individuals in the world know how to use their minds to build themselves into superior beings, they've lost control of you. If they implant a gadget in your head, they own you. And you've lost your occult powers. So it's really sad in these areas that more hasn't been done here, because these shows, just like the ghost shows, if you start looking at them in the masses, and even if only 1% of what they're showing is true, it is mind screwing. Something is here. Something is happening. This is 100% scientific proof, because scientific proof is based on repeatability. That's all it's based on, nothing else. Can you repeat something over and over again? Well, these people are going from one person to another and getting information that appears to be almost 100% valid, and it goes on. This person's been doing it for 8 seasons and has a private practice. So, she's done this for thousands of people over her lifetime, and this is just one of many. And the information and the questions that are given to them and their answers are pretty specific most of the time. This isn't vagary stuff, like your mother liked to wear dresses. A lot of these things are very specific. So, and we don't want to, since there isn't going to be any proper scientific way of looking at these things, then there's no use getting into the intricacies of questions and other things unless it's so poorly done that it's obvious, which isn't the case at all. And most of the people who are qualified and do this get specific informations and do it well. So the bigger question is what's going on here? And what is missed in all these shows is the fact of asking these people, why can't you communicate directly with your loved one, your son, your mother, your father, whoever it is you're trying to contact with? That's the big question here. Why can only certain people do this who are not even connected to these people directly whatsoever? They're not their parents. They're not their children. Why is this the case? So, that's really the big question here. The other question is, how much help can these spirits give to you in your practical life today? And this, again, seems to be something that is overlooked by all these mediums and everything else, other than giving basic facts and figures, which are as boring as can be. But, what can they do? And this could be tested to see if they actually can help you and how they interact with you. Can they help you from the other side? What can they do? What do they know? Do they know about the future? All of these things are interesting and seem never to pan out, which is the reason why these areas lose credibility, because there doesn't seem to be much help in it. You may feel as a person on this side that communicating with a past loved one makes you feel better, because you feel like, they're still there. They're still here in your reality to some extent, and that is comforting, I guess. But past that, nothing seems to be happening. I mean, we've heard stories of relatives coming to people, giving them information, teaching them systems, astral spirit teachers that have come to people. We've heard stories of these, and the information they've gotten has been mediocre at best, but there apparently information can be transferred of some particular value. Are these spirit helpers loved ones in your mind to some extent, helping and directing you? Are they helping you make decisions? Are they keeping you away from dangers? All of these things are the really bigger questions, other than the fact of getting boring information about what basically are past events to prove that a connection was made. Because that's what these shows get down to. They don't get down to anything as I've just discussed. They get down to, yeah, remember when you were 6 and I bought you a G.I. Joe? Oh, yeah, that's right. So the whole idea is that while there's plenty of that can be done in these shows, it doesn't seem to go anywhere past that. So here we go again with this boring psychic readings when there is so much more to explore. But as I said, this is establishing that something is happening here that is quite amazing and quite powerful. Now, the problem with TV is, of course, and anything portrayed by movies, TV, or Hollywood, is they're all doing this to make money, and they're all doing it coming from a particular shtick. And that's exactly what they are. With these shows, it's the positive, look at how wonderful it is. And it's so many shows, it's like that. Even documentaries have these problems because you have to take an opinion when you put out a documentary. Are you going to do a chop job and interview all the debunkers? Or are you going to go and talk to the people who have positive views on it? So the whole idea is that you're going in with a particular already pre-opinion of what you're going to come out with. And of course, these are entertainment shows, and most people have said that. And one of the biggest ones was Art Bell, who never really said he believed or did anything. This is entertainment. Yes, we know there's Martians behind that Hale-Bopp comet, and let's talk about how amazing that is. Cha-ching! And send me a check. So the idea is that, and since there are no qualified people in these fields doing any of this, none of these producers have it, they don't know anybody, and a lot of this has to do that there is no credible organizations out there other than the Guild, and the Guild really isn't all that well known. But, when we were known in different areas and had many media contact us, they did nothing to in any way try and use our services or use us as people that could assist them and work as advisors. So, these are all very important questions. But beyond those, and of course, the reason why I state these things is you have to understand that everything on TV is invented, it is constructed and written. So people are brought in to show up that are actors, to act certain ways. I'm sure that many of the clients that were brought to this person were actors they brought in. And there are shows now that feature actors, known actors, and they talk about their metaphysical and ghost experience. It's amazing how these actors in Hollywood have all these experiences and they can go on shows. The point is that these are done deliberately and they're paid to do this, and you're required to pay people by the union that you are joined as an actor. So these are bits that they do, and they're probably given exact scripts to do this. So it is an acting bit. Yeah, I stayed at this house and these things happen. And I'm sure there was a script telling this actor exactly what to say. And many of them have been involved in this. Everybody from, there's many of them. So how much of that is actually real, if any, is quite questionable. So you need to understand that when you watch anything on TV, that's what you're getting. There are some good documentaries that seem to be putting out valid information. But of course, again, you just don't know. So you can't take anything as fact unless it's shown to you in actually as part of the process. So The big question here is that if there are these spirits and that you can contact and get all this information from, which seems to be irrefutable just by the masses of data that we have, even with all the setups and contrived situations to make things more entertaining. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with that to a degree, but the problem with Hollywood is that it becomes that everything is contrived and there isn't a real thing that happens throughout the entire show. So it gets down to the fact of how much of this is real and how much is not. And people don't have credibility that are mediums or anyone else, even if they are good mediums and are very correct. They are getting paid huge amounts of money. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So we're talking about huge amounts of money here. So I look the other way. It's fun. If people really want the good information, they have to come to me directly. They should understand this is the rationalization that people do in these things. If they really want to find out, they need to come to me directly. But there's a great disservice done here when it gets too far. And I doubt there's very many people with the discipline to pull back when things get a little bit silly. But the question comes yet again, and with all these shows, just like all the ghost shows and the other medium shows, if 10% of this is correct and they're getting this kind of information, what does this mean to our entire universe, consciousness, and everything? It is shocking, because everything we've been told now yet again has been proven that the occult science world is real. It is there, and there is huge amounts of proof. So these types of things which are ignored except by the actual TV shows, which is unfortunate that we have to depend upon this poor and contrived source to filter through and take out the tidbits of scientific research that can be gained from them. It's sad that it comes down to that, but it still gets to the point that it becomes irrefutable if any of these interviews are real whatsoever. It's something that needs, of course, huge amounts of research. And these are the important things we should be researching, which is the mind, body, consciousness functioning, the realities of life after death. These are the things that we are really, seriously interested in. Yet, this is so important to our individual being, our society, our consciousness, that it is left up to TV programs and TV producers that have absolutely no background, no information, nothing they have studied. They've read some book, I'm assuming. And how they even find these mediums, how they're picked, why this woman was picked over so many other mediums out there. So all of these things come together to the fact of is that this is what the important things of our world has been left to. It's been left to the media. Sadly, is this the case? Just like so many philosophical things, and why the media today is very important and much more important than it ever has been. I mean, when you look back at shows from the 50s and 60s, the Leave It to Beavers, the Gilligan's Island, and all the other fairly bad crap movies, even movies that are classics like Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon. I mean, these were books that were turned into movies with some excellent actors and they were good scripts, but there really wasn't much to these. I can't overly look back on older movies. There were a few philosophical older movies, but this has now become the case that philosophical movies such as The Matrix and TV series like The Prisoner and so many other movies that have come out in recent years have a lot of excellent philosophical information in there, presented in a package which is very consumable by the individual, instead of having to read some dry book in philosophy class. So much comes through there, and so many people get their information through the television medium because it is much more interesting, fun, and easy. And a lot of these shows in the last pretty much 5 years here, it's exploded with these shows, which Hollywood's finally figured out that there's money in this. People are interested in it, and it's cheap to produce, these half-an-hour documentaries you see on aliens and UFOs and ancient aliens and ghost and other things. These are very cheaply made, and people are interested in them, and you can fill up time, and everybody's happy because they make their profits with them too. And you don't have to pay actors, you don't have to pay anybody, even if you interview them, which is one of Hollywood's greatest little tricks. They interview you, you make their show, and you get a handshake. Thanks. So the whole idea is that the reality of all these things is that it's come down to much of this, of these shows. And again, the problem is, knowing Hollywood, knowing how contrived everything is that it's difficult to know what percentage of these shows actually are happening. But it is fascinating information. Just if this is true on any aspect, as I've said, it's being ignored, just like all brain functioning is being ignored today, of how to get higher functioning. There are people who have had seizures, brain injuries, and the vast majority of people tend to be retarded and other that have brain damage. But there is a percentage who become geniuses. There are certain autistic people who can remember everything. Well, why can't we figure out what part of the brain, and why isn't studies being done to make that happen naturally? Well, there are political aspects. If everybody had a great memory and everybody pass all it, because passing tests is basically, isn't it all just memory? So the point is that when you really get down to it, they're asking you questions about things, and so if you could memorize a book, you'd be guaranteed to pass it. And that includes even mathematical books and physics books and even chemistry books. It's still a lot of remembering chemical compositions and other things. So it's basically all in the book when you really get down to it. There may be some extra areas, and let's say you failed these extra areas, you still would pass easily by just memorizing a book. So if everybody can memorize a book, then all of a sudden there is no further elite. So it goes on with these things. If everyone has these abilities, if you have it naturally, you're not controlled, you don't need your schools. So the reason why brain work isn't being done here, particularly to find out what centers of the human consciousness create all these things, which as occult scientists we generally know and are pinning down ourselves here to amplify, stimulate these areas to produce these amazing effects. But what comes down to the fact is that there's a lot of political nonsense going on here, and why the human brain isn't being studied much more than it is today is really shocking. So it's all about, you ain't good enough, you're just a human piece of tissue garbage, and we need to put some diode, some computer chip, which is far superior to you, into your head so you can function at a higher level, instead of taking the amazing, most powerful energy tool and energy fields ever known to man, which is the human consciousness, the human brain, and figuring out what generates all these extreme abilities that people have naturally, because there is not a single person that I'm aware of that has any kind of extreme abilities that has something implanted in them. There are people, as I've stated, with amazing memories. People have been able to learn things, and of course, learning is the big thing in life. I mean, really, everything comes down to learning. If we figure we should learn to learn, that's the first thing that everyone should be taught. If we can learn things at a rapid and easy pace, then all sorts of things could be achieved, and people, instead of spending 20 years in college to get higher understanding, so to speak, could get this within a third of the time, which means that all that time could be spent developing things. So these are part of the ridiculousness of seeking outside when machines really have done absolutely nothing, and basically computers, which are good and bad in their own aspects, are really just based on human programs. Somebody has to write a program to do something. Computers don't do anything on their own. They never will, and you can't copy the brain. So, and that will never happen to function at the level that is there. Imitations, Robotrons, androids, well, that's all well and good. And of course, since we can't get along with each other and generally only want to kill each other, it's better having a plastic doll, I guess. So, all that goes into that is the reality here of not seeking these very important areas. But here again, when it comes down to all these kind of TV shows, you have to view them from an occult scientist perspective. And that perspective is, what can we gain out of this? What is this telling us, and what can we learn from it? And are there techniques? Is there something here? And as I said, with all these medium shows, well, these people are making contact with humans who have passed to the other side. Not only humans, many times they're animals as well in some aspects that they can sense there. So the whole idea is this transitory world from the physical to this non-physical world. And what does that mean from us? And what kind of information, power, assistance, and help can we draw from that? And how come some people who are not connected to, let's say, your past mother can talk to your mother, but you can't? I mean, Houdini did this and went to all sorts of mediums. They were able to communicate with his mother, but he couldn't. Why? So the whole idea is that, of course, he thinks everybody was a fraud, but the bottom line is that in general, without using anybody specifically, the question here is, why can some person who is not connected to have the ability to do this? What is within their mental occult structure that allows them to do this, and others can't? Can this be developed as an occult scientist? Now, I believe you probably can. All occult science abilities are something that you can learn. Can you learn to? Why not? You can learn how to build your psychic energies. So why wouldn't you be able to build your sensitivities to communicate with the, quote, other side? So these are all the bigger questions, the fascinating questions, that if you could sit down with these people and work with them over a serious period of time would be something that would be quite exciting and interesting to do, to find out, how can we use these things? Why can't everybody do this? Most people who lose loved ones, are never get over it, and I don't think anybody really gets over losing someone that they're very close to, whether that's a pet or a relative or a friend or whomever. That being able to communicate would be a great comfort and could be a great assistance and tool in life. The whole idea is gaining wisdom from the other side, gaining help from the other side, and just feeling comfort from the other side. So until we bridge these things, until we get past these hateful, illogical, psychotic scientists who want to keep everybody in the world of we can't, we don't know, and we'll never be able to figure that out type of attitude, until we get away from these kind of people who don't want to believe in the real realities, they want to believe in their false created realities, then we will always have these problems, and mankind in itself will always be stuck. But in general, we do encourage people to look at these things from an occult scientist point of view, at least occasionally, and note what we've looked at. So instead of looking at something as pure entertainment and letting the producers and image of that show push their reality onto you, you want your reality to filter into these shows and to examine it from that particular point of view. So a lot more reviews to come. So stay tuned.